my dad worked or took some training in a business school uh, in Minneapolis. And then he went back toward the town of Atwater to a town of Waverly, Minnesota, and got a job in a bank as a bank teller. Now this was 1928 or 1929, right in there, when the whole world crashed into this terrible depression. He worked for, and these are all small hometown, you know, one banks, one location banks. He'd go to work in the morning and the bank would be boarded up, it would be closed. So he got a job at another bank, and he went to that bank, worked for a few weeks, and that bank closed down. So he kind of decided banking wasn't the thing for him. He was still single. My mother was either in going to college or doing her teaching at that point in time. And so he, as a teller in the bank, they actually sold insurance through the teller's window. And you could buy a car insurance policy or a home fire policy, we called them in those days, from the bank, and the teller would just sign you up right there. There was no licensing of insurance agents. Things were very wide open and very unregulated in those days, so that's the way insurance was sold. So he kind of liked the insurance idea, so he actually started, got an appointment with New York Life, and he was going to sell life insurance. And he got some training in that from the company, company school, and he started working around Waverly, training to be a life insurance agent. Well, in the depths of the Depression, the late 20s, there wasn't a lot of people that had any money to spend on life insurance, and you'd sell this debit type life insurance where you'd make weekly collections, and you'd go house to house like a paper boy. Ouch. Collecting for his newspaper route, and get your weekly premium. That's the way people were buying it in those days, because that's the only way they could afford it. And he's heard of this insurance agency in Rochester that was for sale, called the Peters Agency. And he went down and interviewed this Mr. Peters, I guess. And on January 22nd, 1930, my dad bought and opened this agency. He renamed it the A.A. Hirman Company, or A.A. Hirman Agency. And he went down there, and he thought that would be a good place to start his career in the property and casualty insurance business now, because the life business was just... So he borrowed $1,000 from a lumberyard owner that he'd gotten to know in Waverly, and he borrowed $900 from my mother, and he bought this insurance agency. My mother was not married to him at this time, but she had a little money that she had inherited, I guess, when her dad died or something. So he bought this agency and opened it up on the 22nd of January 1930, and started working. Rented a room in Rochester and started working there. And I think he and my mom were engaged before he opened the agency, and she finished her teaching of the year, her contract, she was a junior high math teacher. So he's down there as a single man starting in this insurance business, not knowing what the heck he's doing, but getting his feet wet. That following June of 1930, he and my mother got married, a big wedding ceremony at the Swedish Lutheran Church in Atwater. And mother moved down to Rochester, and she started working with my dad in the agency. She did inside work, the bookkeeping and the keeping the records of the policies. They called them dailies. They'd file them in drawers, just on top of each other, not a file drawer like we have nowadays. Down on Broadway in Rochester, above a building, it was a walk-up stairway. You'd walk up between two storefronts above a Stevens clothing company or ladies wear company, and that was his first office. I suppose that was the office of this Peters agency that he bought. I don't know, but that's where he started his business. The book of business he bought from this fellow Peters, no one had paid their premiums for years. And so what it was a bunch of collections that he inherited. And he and my mom would go out in the evenings and they'd knock on doors and ask people if they could pay $1 or $5 toward this premium they owed for last year or however long it hadn't been paid. And so collecting past premiums and trying to keep new business on the books and keep things current was a struggle. My folks were so poor in those days. They didn't take any salary out of the business for 5 years. They just lived kind of on expenses. They wrote everything down in a little spiral notebook that had the spiral on the top and lined paper. I think I still have some of these notebooks. Everything they bought a package of gum. They wrote gum 5 cents, something 3 cents. They bought a stamp. I mean, every penny they accounted for. That's how careful they were with their money.